and Meghan's trip to Colombia has ended, and it has left the public asking three main questions, and their answers are not what the Sussexes were hoping to hear. Hi everyone, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to break down the controversy that has swirled around this Colombia trip that has really brought forth some interesting conversations behind these trips and the Sussexes in general. And for the Sussexes and their PR people, their entire team, a most concerning angle to this trip has overtaken the narrative. Questions about the ethics of the Sussexes themselves going on this trip to Colombia, their Nigeria trip, and any others that they plan on doing in the future have been raised. People are wondering, was this ethical? This is the last thing that they were wanting or expecting. For people to come away from the press releases from this trip wondering whether or not it was an ethical choice is really hard to walk back in the best of times. But unfortunately for Harold and the Meg, they didn't back up their trip with enough substance or enough do-gooding to be able to combat this public opinion and criticism, which is really valid and also quite serious. Had they come to the table with something significant or brought with them substantial donations or experts or included something that was objectively for the greater good, they would have been able to defend themselves against this, but they didn't. So now the narrative has shifted to all the ways that this trip took advantage of a country whose population is struggling with poverty. Locals have come forth saying that they are absolutely bewildered at what has just occurred. One of the key elements to this discussion is the fact that they required absolute maximum security. Thousands of police officers, way more than the Sussexes needed or deserved, quite frankly. All of this together is not only costing Colombia over $2 million to provide the security and accommodation to the Sussexes, but it's a vast inconvenience for the locals. They're closing down roads, they're blocking off streets for the Sussexes to swoop in and have just a few minutes with people to get pictures and video footage. They've had helicopters, they've had drones surveying the areas and watching from overhead. They've had a tank involved at one point. It's all really too much and kind of laughable. We're talking about people who are millionaires themselves. Even Harry has been in the media lately because he's set to receive a millions of dollars inheritance next month. So it's only natural for people to wonder, is it ethical for these millionaires to bill an impoverished country for such ridiculous over-the-top security and expenses to boot? In February 2024, Opportunity International reported that the number of Colombians experiencing extreme poverty was increasing, with 13.8% of the population living on less than $2.15 a day. These individuals may struggle to find food and shelter and choose between feeding their children or sending them to school. The question of who is footing this bill for the trip is not known, with the Sussexes claiming that the trip was paid for with economic support by international cooperation. What that sounds like is that they billed Colombia for everything. Additionally, for people who have lectured the public about the environment, how does a 14-car convoy, tanks, helicopters, dozens more police officer vehicles fit into that position exactly? And it would seem it's not just the media and the general public who are wondering why they did this performative, choreographed, publicized vacation, aka a very expensive publicity stunt. The locals are equally uninterested. They're confused and annoyed about this. Media not hired by the couple who went to Colombia during this trip spoke with locals, found that most of them had no idea who Harry and Meghan were, which further highlights just how far away the locals were kept from the Sussexes and the events they were doing, as well as the lack of reaching out to actually make a difference. They didn't have an impact. People still don't know who they are, people who live there. But also that these curated appearances have been seen for what they are, which is photo ops. Some quotes from locals say that they're nothing special. Who cares? The consensus is, what does Colombia have to do with any of this? Some locals assert that it was just as much a vanity project for the vice president as it was for the Sussexes. When their presence is not benefiting the people of Colombia, in fact it ended up a negative, they've garnered only shallow, empty, and pointless positive PR. For example, the positive articles are things about them attempting to dance or appear affectionate. These types of things cannot carry an entire faux tour, as the media keeps calling it. The next big question everyone is asking, should the Sussexes be doing these types of trips at all? A poll taken yesterday reveals the public overwhelmingly think not. Perhaps that's not quite as damaging to their image as having their ethics questioned, but it's just as damaging to their long-term plans and prospects of continuing these style of publicized vacations. They followed a royal template so closely that parallels were drawn in all ways, revealing their trip to lack any significance, in contrast to actual royal tours, and therefore the public is not only confused at the Sussexes' pathetic attempt to pretend to be on a royal tour, but they are also admonishing them for such activities. On top of all these moral and ethical questions, this trip is not educating people about online safety as the press releases would have you believe, or any other philanthropic initiative or humanitarian cause. This trip did not make progress on any issue. It did, however, provide the Sussexes and the VP lots of pictures and lots of videos staged to make it look like they're important. While this trip really seems to have had no purpose or real direction, it was a burden to the citizens of Colombia and comes with an astronomical carbon footprint, high risk of inducing headache in the public at large, and was expensive to the Colombian government. It's clear now, as the trip has come to an end, that it revealed more negatives, highlighted the Sussexes' lack of awareness and poor judgment, and the problems with their wayward attempts at finding relevance for themselves are now being discussed in a much more serious tone. It didn't get the positive publicity that they probably had hoped for, and this time around it seemed to have gotten far more serious than their Nigeria trip, with these financial implications, the environmental hypocrisy, paired up with a total lack of substance. But leave it in the comments what you think. And now it's time for question of the day, but rather this time a very apt comment from Stuart. Napoleon remarked, "Never interfere or interrupt your enemy when they are making mistakes." Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. I hope you have a happy day ahead, and be sure you're subscribed and click the like button if you enjoyed today's video, and I will see you next time. Have a happy day, everybody. Bye.